for questions about what the big study is about. Hopefully everyone is moved in the direction of as tired as we were in doing it. Once you get the good news from IAS that they've approved such a study, it's one of those good news, bad news sorts of things. And the bad news is now you have to do it. So, any questions? Mickey?
Still not very clear about the correspondence between the content versus I mean, I know what the content science thing you did, but I can't, is there any mapping between what the content control?
The content control, so the idea, so just to give you a little bit of the rationale, when you teach high school science, you have to be certified for secondary. When you teach middle school science in most states, you can either be a secondary certified person or an elementary certified person. And in urban districts, you're more likely to be elementary certified, which means you're not any kind of science background. And then also in middle school, unlike in high school, you're very likely to be random assigned to a grade, which might be not the kind of science that you studied. So like you were a biology major and now you're doing physics, which is very unlikely to happen, or well, less likely to happen in high school. So the idea is, I'm now teaching, basic cell biology, and I never took that. Maybe someone should explain to me some basics of cell biology so that when I go through the lectures with the book or support the kids in their questions as they reason about data, I've got a foundation beyond where the kids are literally right now. So that's the basic logic, and large quantities of NSF dollars have been spent on fixing that particular problem. Does that help?
Right, so they're not matched. It's not like this teacher's going to teach this, so she's going to get more information on this background knowledge.
It is matched on what they are teaching. So we look at, this covers this topic, this topic, this topic. So we're going to go on that topic, cover it, and then a little deeper under it. So if there's so it's not all of what would happen in a college biology class. It's the parts that underlie those topics that they would be covering in that unit.
Let me just also add, just for clarity, so the 30 schools that were in the content just got the content, and the 30 schools in the CogSci just got the CogSci. We didn't want to mix a content teacher and a CogSci teacher in the same school, because that's why we had to randomize at the school level. Let me also clarify that the 18 hours of professional development were per unit. So we had 3 units, so a person would have gotten, if they taught, and often they did, it's like 7th and 8th grade, they would have gotten 3 times 18, plus they would have gotten PLCs. They would have gotten 8 hours of PLCs, 8 days of PLCs.
Well, 8 hours the first year and then possibly 8
8 hours the second year, per unit, okay? And then we had that, and the content, as Chris said, was closely matched to the actual book that they would be teaching.
Yeah, of course. Adam.
A couple of clarifications on the design. So thanks for explaining that the content group only got the content PD and the CogSci group only got the CogSci PD. Were they using the same curricular materials?
You could only be in the study if you used these particular...
Yes, so even the control group was using, the no PD group was using the same, everybody used the same curriculum.
That's right. We went with Philadelphia. It's a managed curriculum. You use something that's not beginning with H and ending with T, then you get fired.
Could you clarify the quantity of professional development that a given teacher would have received? Because there's just been a lot of numbers floating around and it's hard for me to keep straight. How much professional development how many hours of professional development, both in the summer And in the professional learning follow-up, did a given teacher receive in the content PD group and in the CogSci PD group?
So it would have been,
Would have been 24 per unit.
26.
no, it would have been-
Yeah, we're 26.
it would have been 26 hours per unit per teacher.
And then an additional 8 that unit the next
The
year.
following year.
And then the following year as well.
Okay,
So
but did a given teacher teach 3 units?
some did.
Sometimes.
Some did, some didn't.
Yes.
So one who taught 3 units would have received 3 times 26 hours.
That's right.
That's involved.
That's right.
3 times 18 during the summer, 3 times 8 during the
Right,
year.
right, that's right.
And
Well, we never did all 3 units once.
Oh, they stayed in the study for both cohorts.
then they
Extra
got,
max
they
out,
got
about
a,
3 units, cohort 1, 3 units, cohort 2. That would be 3 times 26 plus 3 times and 24 more.
and was it 3 new units the second year?
No, they were doing the same unit again.
Yes.
Okay, and they had a second round of professional development.
Some extra deepening.
Yeah, I follow you.
So what they did was, the first cohort was a try it out year, and the money year was the second cohort. And because they did revisions, the CogSci people did revisions based upon the actual implementation. We went back, and then when they did the revisions, we had more professional development, a little bit more professional development to reorient the CogSci teachers as to what was different. But we did the same amount for the content. We tried to equalize that.
So one clarification, for the content unit, the content arm, they only got content. For the cognitive science arm, they got cognitive science strategies, but they also received content instruction because you can't necessarily teach these strategies in a vacuum. So they received some content PD also.
But that was part of the same amount of time. And if you think about it in ratios, it's mostly the CogSci things. Most of the content learning would be, well, as they're doing those as learners and being supported, they're, pushing on that. And then, there are conversations that come up, like, how does this actually work? And then, you have to answer these questions. But there wasn't a whole separate, with university professors, deepening thing on top of that.
The only caveat to this is that in the case of Arizona, there were some FOSS teachers who were brand new to FOSS. And so to equalize the treatment, we did 2 days of just FOSS training to make sure that there wasn't variations in the entry level of the teachers as it pertained to FOSS itself, so that we could just sort of measure the added value.
Across the board.
All 3
That's
arms
all-
got
Yeah,
that.
but all 3 arms got it.
CogSci content and control were all invited to
And
that.
that's standard to the FOSS curriculum anyway.
Yeah, right. So we just filled in that blank, but for everybody.
So I have 2 questions. The first question is, did you have any assessment of teacher learning? So to clarify, is there a way to compare the learning of the teachers in both groups to equate them?
Yes, we did measure that. All 3 arms in a post-only did a teacher knowledge, and it was designed based on what was taught in the content arm. So we figured out, this is what we're teaching. Here are test items that test what that was, and all 3 arms did that as part of the study. Teachers did.
And then question 2 is, so for the content only, the teachers were treated as learners, so they
Yes.
were taught the content. Do you know if they mimicked the way they were taught in the
Well, again, there were active learning strategies used. The teachers could use them. We didn't support it. If there were PowerPoints, we only gave them paper versions of it. But I would assume they may have used it, yes, but that wasn't a part of our training necessarily to model it. We just used it as a means to explain concepts.
A couple of clarification questions. One, in terms of the space testing. So you mentioned that there were some warm-up questions, some quizzes, and then some testing at the end. I assume that that's what happens for the experimental group, the control group, did it get the warm-up questions only, or they got nothing?
So, as part of the study design, as the research piece, everybody in all three arms got an end-of-unit assessment that was meant to be in lieu of what would normally be their end-of-unit assessment. So don't use whatever test you're using, use ours. We put some effort in having that be nicely aligned to that. But other than that, we told the content and the control arms nothing about what their testing practices should be other than that test that we're using as the outcome measure. So obviously they had more than one test per whole unit, but very typical practice is only subunit tests. That is, when you finish the first 3 chapters and you have a test, you test on those chapters, and then when you do chapters 4 through 6, it only covers content of 4 through 6. And some do a little bit of a warm-up. Some teachers like that as a class routine, is when you come into the class, you see a question on the board and you fill something out. But that we didn't tell them to do it or not do it. It was really against whatever standard practice was. I think Dan in the back.
A question about your pilot work. In the Content Plus CogSci group, you did a first round of piloting, and I was just wondering if there were any broad takeaway messages from that work. I think it's wonderful that you wrote that in. And did you just fine tune, or would you say there were broad issues? And then a second question, if there's time.
We were building this plane as we flew it. So, believe me, the first use of the materials was like hot off the press. You know, maybe they got emailed to teachers 2 days before, and those teachers who were, Kara can verify this. So there was a lot of feedback from teachers about just within the really more within the management part of this. So the setup of this and that, this would work better than that, I did this and that. So there was a lot of genuine feedback. We had teachers working very hard with us to help us make these materials be ones which would be easily managed in the classroom. And we did not do piloting for content. The piloting piece was only the CogSci piece.
Right.
Did you talk a little bit about the train and trainer model?
Before we
Pilot
do
teachers.
I just want to clarify the one.
So there's the biggest revisions are from the piloting phase, and I think even within that space, the most revisions were done to the units that we worked on first. So we learned a lot about some genres, really, some schemas for how to set things up, or what kinds of instructions need to be included, and also leveling at middle school. You know, a lot of us have done work at lots of different levels, and your own intuitions about, you know, what's appropriate at middle school, what words are, you know, what things are engaging. There were some things that were just like, I was like watching grass grow, you know.
The pilot teachers were not in the study. They were the schools that they taught in were not, and the schools that they taught in were not in the study, and they were done prior to the cohort 1 teachers who were in the study. So we've had 2 bites at the apple. The first one being the pilot schools, and the second one being the rollout in cohort 1. In a big implementation, we got feedback from them, and then went back a second time to do the revisions. So.
And some of these were revised almost 4 times. And when we were out in Arizona, it was interesting because we had the teachers back for the first year teachers back for the revisions. We sort of tried to count people back annually to, you know, help them know what was going on in the project and have them feel included still, you know, and valued. So we had them, invited them back, and teachers looked at the revisions and they said, you actually used some of our suggestions.
So the real, as I said, the money year was the cohort 2. because that's where we figured that we'd have the best shot at showing an effect. Jennifer, you had a comment?
Just if John could talk about the way that the pilot teachers were involved in the later PD.
Right, right. I mean, our pilot teachers became our presenters of the professional development. So, their credibility in the classroom in presentation of the materials was far greater than anyone else's could have been, because they had used them for like 3 years in the classroom, and they could speak very clearly to how to make these things work better with kids and their own belief in them. I mean, we have some people who, when they first came in, did not believe in this, and then became great believers. And those great believers became our greatest presenters, too.
So, other questions? Yes, Dan.
I may have missed it. My seatmate was very chatty. Have you added measures to the assessments that are selective to the mechanisms you're after? Case comparison should be good for transfer, visualization should be good for reading new visualizations.
We did add these in, but on a light basis. The dominant theme of the study was, does it matter? Kind of study. It wasn't a how come or a racehorse. Did my things matter more than her things? We weren't playing that kind of a game as a dominant theme here. We did at the back end of all of the end of unit assessments. The CogSci team had a little window of their questions that are not included in these big impact analyses, and some of them were focused on what was targeted by the contrasting cases. In particular, if the kids learned what we really pushed on directly, that should show up here. We had some that were based on what immediately followed from the contrasting case concept. So if you understood that idea, then you should be especially likely to learn the following idea that's then in the readings or in the experiment, et cetera. There were a bunch of visualization questions per se, organized in in this domain and in a transfer kind of way. And I guess one could do a reanalysis by what items were tested, how often, and what spacing, but we haven't yet begun that. So that's not going to be our focus right now, but we did, being scientists fundamentally at heart, we wanted to sneak that in there.
Well, just to say, sneak, there were 6 questions, 2 per each group, and there was a matrix sampling of the test. We had 6 different versions of a test, so we had 36 of these items.
So Joe is saying we were being a pain in his.
And mostly Indiana's. Yes.
Can you give us a clue how those internal analyses looked?
Let's let Andy do his big show and then ask that question again.
So here we are 5 years later, after launching this center to basically take the work of the cognitive science community, or a portion of it, and see, can we actually use this in real classrooms in a big scaled way and get some results? That was the big question that we got the center purpose for. Basically to serve not only the cognitive science community, but more importantly the kids of this country.